Coming up on today's show, the Predators decide to match Philadelphia's offer for Shea Weber. Rick Nash finds a new home in New York, and the NCAA comes down hard on Penn State. All that and more coming up on the good, the bad, the Teskey. Welcome to episode 6 of The Good, The Bad, The Teskey. I am your host, Colin Teskey, and we got some big news in hockey today. A lot to talk about. A lot of big-name players now have signed new contracts. They're in some new places. Let's start off with Shea Weber of the Nashville Predators. So a week ago, the Philadelphia Flyers general manager Paul Holmgren sent out a ridiculous offer sheet to restricted free agent Shea Weber. The deal was 14 years, worth $110 million. Nashville had a week to match, and 6 days later, David Poile, the general manager, did the right move here and has signed Shea Weber to this deal. I'll tell you the terms of the deal right now. Weber will be making $14 million the next 4 seasons. He'll make $12 million in year 5 and 6 of the deal, while in season 7 and 10, he'll make $6 million. And then in the remaining 4 years of that deal, he will be making a measly $1 million. And not to mention, there's $68 million in bonuses as well on the table. So definitely the Philadelphia Flyers went big. They went gangbusters after Shea Weber. My thoughts are they're probably doing this because they're afraid Chris Pronger is going to retire due to concussion trouble and all of that. So definitely a good move, though, by Nashville. You lost Ryan Suter this year to the Minnesota Wild because you didn't offer him enough money. Let's be honest. The only reason Ryan Suter left a solid playoff team like Nashville, where he spent his entire career, to go to a place like Minnesota was for the money. Yes, I think he wanted to play with his buddy Zach Parise as well, but Zach Parise left for the money, and that's really what this is boiling down to. And this is a contract that the league, I think, is trying to eliminate with the CBA talks. But for right now, Nashville did the right thing here. They couldn't just let Shea Weber walk and get 4 first-round picks back from Philadelphia and consider that a victory. 4 first-round picks from Philadelphia isn't going to do anything for your franchise in the grand scheme of things. They're going to be late first-round picks, and the odds of one of them turning into a player of Shea Weber's caliber is very unlikely. And it is good for a small market like Nashville as well. They've had some great success the last couple of years in the playoffs. They've taken the franchise to new heights, advancing to the second round. And, you know, this team is building something in Nashville. The fans have been coming out to playoff games. They've been loud. And now you get your captain re-signed for 14 seasons. I know it's a long, lengthy deal, but it's good that this team here in Nashville didn't get bullied and didn't cave under the pressure from Philadelphia, who is a bigger sports market and has been known to throw money at restricted free agents. I really applaud David Poile and the whole Nashville Predators management team for keeping Shea Weber and keeping him a Predator most likely for the rest of his career.
Turnover, Sillinger, blistering rebound, and it's Rick Nash, first NHL goal. Sneaks in, he's onside, shoots, scores, cuts in on the right side, and he gets a weak one away, rebound, scores! He does it again, right centers, Nash shoots, scores, Rick Nash, cheating Nash, breakaway again, shoots, scores, Nash wins it in overtime.
Well, there you have it. There are some highlights from Rick Nash's career as a Columbus Blue Jacket, which came to an end yesterday. As TSN reported the deal, he is going to one of his preferred destinations all along. He is going to the Big Apple, joining the New York Rangers. Going the other way to the Columbus Blue Jackets is Artem Anisimov, center Brandon Dubinsky, prospect Tim Erickson, and a first-round pick in 2013. And you got to say, if you're a hockey fan, you were following the story since the March trade deadline, you have to be scratching your head trying to understand why it took this long to fornicate this deal, which really is nothing much going back to the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're not acquiring anybody that is equal value to Rick Nash and is going to replace their leading goal scorer and their captain. Now, you look at Brandon Dubinsky. He was in the doghouse this year with John Tortorella all season long because John Tortorella couldn't get him going and couldn't get him to produce offensively. The guy only had 10 goals this year. You look at Artem Anisimov as well. He was a streaky winger, spent some time on the second and third line for New York. Really just wasn't a guy that could produce, 25 goals or 30 goals. And now that's what he's going to be expected to do in Columbus. He only had 16 goals last season. You have a guy like Tim Erickson you're putting a lot of faith in, one of the top prospects for New York, putting a lot of faith in him. And you're putting a lot of faith in a first-round pick that most likely won't be until later in the first round. Especially now that they've acquired Rick Nash, the Rangers aren't going to be finishing outside of the top 20 unless they grossly underachieve, which I don't see happening. So really this deal, you've got a lot of guys that are going to fill up some roster holes, but they're not going to significantly impact your roster. And if you're Scott Housen, the GM of the Columbus Blue Jackets, you have to be worried about selling tickets. How are you going to put Brandon Dubinsky on the front of a ticket and tell season ticket holders to renew for this upcoming season? How are you going to attract new fans with a guy like Artem Anisimov playing on your first line with Derek Brassard? There's just not enough there, I think, to pull the trigger. I don't know if Scott Housen just felt panicked or he just was fed up with all these trade talks and wanted to just get it over with. But he dragged this on so long, thinking that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel and he was going to get some very good players back in return for Rick Nash. Now, if you want to do this deal and you want to look at the New York Rangers and what they'd have to give up to make this kind of a fair deal, I think they'd have to give up Derek Stepan. They'd have to give up a young forward or defenseman, maybe Carl Hagelin or Michael Deslato, one of the two, plus Tim Erickson and some picks, a package of picks, not just a first-round pick this year. That would make this fair for a premier player like Rick Nash, probably one of the best power forwards in the game outside of Ryan Getzlaf. Now look at some of Nash's numbers. The guy has 289 career goals. He's one of only 4 players to score 30 or more goals the last 5 seasons. So he joins Jarome Iginla, Ilya Kovalchuk, and Alex Ovechkin. And all Glenn Sather had to give up was Brandon Dubinsky, Artem Anisimov, a prospect, and a first-round draft pick. These 2 players are not going to be missed by New York. And Columbus is going to struggle next year with who they've picked up. And they're really going to be a team that might be a franchise on the move in the next couple of seasons. Now, here's a topic I've been wanting to get to. It's a more serious one, but it's one that I feel is going to make a lot of people try to forget what happened in the Jerry Sandusky trial that got discovered back in November. The NCAA has finally taken action now, and Mark Emmert spoke yesterday on the consequences they're going to be laying down against Penn State, and it's going to be something that's going to, it's not going to fully aid the parents and the victims of this case, but it's going to help, send a message that these guys aren't just messing around and they don't take these kind of situations lightly. And I really applaud President of the NCAA, Mark Emmert, for his speech yesterday. Here's a little snippet from what he had to say.
No matter what we do here today, there is no action we can take that'll remove their pain and anguish. But what we can do is impose sanctions that both reflect the magnitude of these terrible acts and that also ensure that Penn State will rebuild an athletic culture that went horribly awry.
And horribly awry is a good way of putting it. If you're guys talking about Penn State and how one of the most prestigious programs in football has taken a huge fall from grace and is now littered with one of the biggest scandals in sports that we have ever seen. And the football program that had prided itself in being a school where people would go not only just to play football and go play professionally, but a place where players would go, they'd receive a good education, and they'd get great coaching from a great guy like Joe Paterno, and they'd go on to do great things with their life no matter what field they entered. A destination for kids to go and grow up to be bright young men, and that could really contribute to society. Paterno also had a motto called Success with Honor, and honor being the highest thing that he wanted his players to have and take with them for the rest of his life. But then all Joe Paterno could do and think about when all these victims had come forward, and then he knew his former defensive coordinator had sexually abused these kids, was to cover up for his friend to protect the Penn State football program because it was so prestigious, because he had been there so long, and he wanted to protect his own dignity and not have to worry about any of this. The morals of that are just wrong. And I don't have any problem with Mark Emmert and the NCAA taking away his wins from 1998 to 2012. A lot of people have said that his records should have stayed and he was a great coach and he should be remembered for that. But if you see Joe Paterno at the top of wins by head coaches, you just by his name, you automatically associate himself with Jerry Sandusky and him sexually abusing young boys. That's just what you see. So the NCAA wants to get rid of that. They want to have his name as far away from the record books as they can so it doesn't draw extra attention decades from now on this horrible, horrible crime that was committed on a university campus. Also, they're going to have to pay $60 million out of their own pocket to the NCAA. 4 years where they're not going to be allowed to compete in a bowl game. Instead of having 25 scholarships, they're going to have 15. So a lot of stuff has happened to Penn State. This is worse than the death penalty Southern Methodists received. They only received a 1-year ban from bowl games, and no one even knows Southern Methodist has a football program anymore. They are just completely off the map, and no one even knows about them anymore. And this happened 20-odd years ago. And then I don't also get why people think that the current football players on Penn State are suffering because of this, and it's unfair to them. Mark Emmert clearly stated in his speech that these players can transfer to any school in the country, and they won't be penalized and have to miss a full season because they transfer. They can transfer, and they can play right away. So these football players have every right to go somewhere else and still play football, and they aren't suffering one bit. Anything, I thought they'd go a little more than that. I thought they'd go more than 4 years and really crank the hammer down on Penn State. I think this was fair. I think they nailed it, and you know what? You can't be unsatisfied with what the NCAA decided to do to Penn State. And the NCAA is trying to move on from this. It's been a very tough year for them dealing with this whole situation. All they really need right now is for the season to start as soon as possible and for people to focus on college football in the upcoming season and put Penn State, Joe Paterno, and Jerry Sandusky in the back of their minds. We're trying to get the podcast out as much as I can, but I'd like to thank all of you for listening. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to listen right here on YouTube, and I appreciate it, and all of you guys have a good one.